Well, with us now entering the final few hours of the shift, episode 12 of The Pit Season 2 really felt like a turning point for a lot of characters. Not because of major action, but because of the mental pressure that's slowly building inside the ER. And honestly, this episode was less about what's happening physically and more about what's happening psychologically, especially with the clear parallels between Dr. Santos and Dr. Langdon, Dana dealing with the trauma from her past, and Dr. Robbie slowly losing control of everything around him. And with that being said, let's dive into the episode, break it all down, and I'll also share my thoughts on it. Here is The Pit Season 2, Episode 12, Ending Explained. And just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. So starting with Dr. Langdon and Dr. Santos, because this was easily one of the most important aspects of the episode, and what stood out the most was the way the show drew a direct parallel between the two characters, even though they are constantly at odds with each other.
Because from Santos's perspective, Langdon is the reason for a lot of the negativity in her life, especially after the way he treated her on her very first day, humiliating her in front of everyone and making her feel completely out of place. And even though time has passed, it's clear that she never truly moved on from that moment. And his return to the ER has essentially reopened that wound, because what we're seeing now is Santos mentally being taken back to that exact point in time, and it's affecting everything about her behavior. The way she talks to patients, the way she interacts with others, and even the way she carries herself. And it finally starts to explain why she always seems so frustrated and disconnected, because it's not that she hates the job, it's that she associates the job with that experience. And now that Langdon is back, that safe space she had started to build for herself has been completely flipped upside down again. And what made this even more interesting was the moment she took the scalpel, because it mirrored what Langdon had been doing with stealing medication. And even though the reasons behind their actions are completely different, the parallel is still there.
Because both of them are being pushed by the same environment, and it shows how the pressure of the ER is starting to break people in different ways. And I honestly think this is setting up something much bigger between the two of them, because if the show continues down this path, we could end up seeing a moment where Langdon is actually the one who helps Santos, which would be a full circle moment considering everything that's happened between them. Now, when it comes to Dr. Langdon himself, this episode really showed just how isolated he's become since everything was exposed. Because not only is he dealing with his addiction, but he's also dealing with the way everyone around him now views him. And that shift in perception is something that can be just as damaging as the addiction itself. Because we saw Dr. Al-Hashimi completely change the way she treated him, going from someone who respected his opinion to someone who wouldn't even
let him contribute when it came to patient care. And that kind of rejection and pressure environment like the ER can push someone even further towards relapse, especially when you add in the fact that Dr. Robbie doesn't even want him there. And Santos is constantly judging him, so he's essentially surrounded by people who either don't trust him or don't want him around. And that's a dangerous place for someone like Langdon to be in, because recovery requires support, and right now he has none, which makes me think that the show is building towards a breaking point for him before the shift ends, and whether that results in him relapsing or proving himself again is something that could play a huge role in the finale. And then we have Dana, whose storyline was easily the most emotional part of the episode, because for the first time this season, we're seeing her crack under the pressure, and it all stems from the trauma she experienced back in Season 1 when she was attacked, something that she never fully dealt with and instead chose to suppress. And now, with Emma being attacked, it's brought all of that fear back to the surface, and you could see it in the way she reacted, especially with her carrying that syringe for protection and eventually using it, which is a huge moment because it shows just how far she's been pushed mentally. And even though she was trying to protect someone, the way she did it puts her in a very risky position.
Professionally, and what made it even more heartbreaking was the moment she told Emma to press charges, because it felt like she was projecting her own regret, telling Emma to do what she never did. And that adds a whole new layer to her character because it shows that underneath that strong exterior, she's been struggling this entire time, and now it's finally starting to show. And finally, when we look at Dr. Robbie, it's becoming more and more clear that he's not in a good place mentally, because throughout this episode, we saw how overwhelmed he was by everything happening in the ER, constantly moving from one situation to another, never really having a moment to breathe, and it genuinely felt like he was sinking under the pressure, which is exactly how it was described in the episode, like quicksand, and the more he tries to control everything, the worse it gets. And what makes his situation even more concerning is the fact that he has an opportunity to step away, to take a break and go on his trip, but he just can't bring himself to do it. And that hesitation says a lot, because it suggests that the hospital is the only thing keeping him grounded, and without it, he doesn't know what he might do. And that ties into the theme we've been seeing throughout the season of
him almost tempting fate, pushing himself closer and closer to the edge, and if he doesn't step away soon, it really feels like something bad is going to happen. On the lighter side, we had Joy, who brought a bit of balance to the episode, but also delivered one of the most important messages, which is the importance of setting boundaries, because unlike everyone else, she chose to clock out when her shift ended and not let the job consume her. And that's something that a lot of the other characters are struggling with, and it made her exit feel like a strong and meaningful moment, especially considering how much she's grown as a character throughout the season. And then with the ending of the episode, the situation with Orlando being readmitted after leaving early and Dante's condition getting worse, it reinforced the idea that actions have consequences, especially in a place like the ER where every decision matters. And it sets the stage perfectly for the final episodes, where it feels like the focus is going to shift even more towards the characters and their mental states rather than just the chaos of the hospital itself. Overall, I thought this episode was good. Maybe not as strong as episode 11, but it did a great job of building tension and developing the characters as we head into the final stretch. And if this is the direction the show is taking, then the finale has the potential to be something really special.